Hi, I'm Kate,
And I'm Toni, and
and
this
this
is
is
Sip
Sip
and
and
Stim.
Stim.
Pour a cup, take a break, settle down and join us on a whim. Gentle thoughts, honest talks, it's time for a sip and stim.
Welcome to Sip and Stim, where parenting on the spectrum pairs best with caffeine, coping skills, and stims.
So, Tony, how are you this week? Anything new?
I'm good. I think one of the highlights was coming home yesterday and seeing all of our laundry folded. That was pretty exciting. Um, that was a highlight for me. No one loves laundry. And I've just been very focused on professional endeavors over here. So, very excited. I'm working on a business to support the Southern New York area. And I'm very excited. It's been a dream for a very long time to help families that are impacted by autism and not just autism, but people that with disabilities and IEP advocacy, something that I'm just very passionate about. So getting some movement there. It's slow, but exciting.
That's really exciting, and that's great for you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, very excited about that. How about you? How have things been going for you this week?
Pretty good. Our neighbor just got a yellow lab puppy, and I've been obsessed with it. So every time she's outside, I try to sneak out and just conveniently pick up leaves, even though they might be invisible, um, just because I want to see the dog really bad. Um, and yeah, she's really cute. Yeah, I have a soft spot. I love big dogs, and they're just like my favorite thing. So
And you guys have two, right? You have two dogs,
yeah, we have a Great Dane mix and a Bernese Mountain Dog.
and they like to make little guest appearances here and there, which is pretty fun. So.
Yeah, yeah. Duke is actually he's our Great Dane mix. He's in our Wizard of Oz book. So that's the cute little book that's about our family. So yeah, adorable.
I did see that. I got to read your book long before I met you. So that was pretty
Oh,
exciting.
that is exciting. Yeah, people love
Yeah.
it, so it's fun. So what are we talking about today?
So it's one of my favorite topics, even though it's probably most of people's least favorite topics. Um, so IEPs. When you think of an IEP meeting, Kate, like what are your first thoughts on that? What comes to mind?
Well, you probably just heard my little chuckle. Um, well, I always joke and say, like the week leading up to Grayson's IEP meeting, I'm usually preparing for battle. So I am like rereading his IEP, which is like 70 something pages, and I'm preparing to just go in and fight. So when I think about IEPs, it's literally like that scene in Braveheart when you have, who is it, Mel Gibson? Is it Mel Gibson? I'm pretty sure.
I think so.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, when he's like up at the top of the hill and he's got all the face paint on and stuff like that. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. Because because IEPs they're scary. Um, you're literally walking into the unknown in a way. Like it's going to be long, it's going to be a lot of words that you probably won't understand. And you have to go in and you just have to fake it till you make it and make sure you're getting what your kid needs.
Yeah, for sure. I can tell from like as a bystander experience that is very common of what I hear from families. And also I will say even personally, I can feel that as well because I'm so emotionally invested in the progress of my clients that I service. And as a BCBA, I've been able to really help out in this way. And previously I was a special educator, so I was on the opposite side of the table, but um I've always viewed it as like a, whole team approach. But you're right. I know if I'm asked to come to an IEP meeting, I better clear my whole day because
Mhm.
God only knows how long that meeting's going to last.
Mhm.
And it is draining emotionally, mentally, my brain is fried after that meeting. And I'm sure that it's probably nowhere near of what a parent feels due to their level of emotions that are tied to it. There's definitely a lot of words thrown your way that don't make any sense or mean anything to you, and people don't always think to explain. Um, and then the other thing you think about, you have these large teams, usually have all these professionals and related service providers in the meeting, and it's just you there on your lonesome, maybe your spouse, maybe if you have an advocate, maybe not everyone has that. So I think that there can be a feeling of like, it's me against them, which is sad because I don't think it should be that way, but that is the raw reality of it. And then also I think about their parents, that their mom and dad, they're not doing this. They're not writing IEPs. They don't understand the laws or the rules or the options unless they're told. And these school professionals, they do this every day. It's nothing new to them. So I think, kind of setting up the meeting, like, the mindset behind it, the vibe of the meeting, I think those are very common things. Would you say that families probably feel going into
Yeah,
it?
yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's one thing if you're going in and you're fine and there's no problems and you're not anticipating any issues. But it's another thing if you're going in and your child's been having problems or you've been bringing up issues that you're trying to address and things like that. Unfortunately for us, most of the time we're going in and there's been issues. And, we're going in trying to either make sense of what is going on. Usually those are the IEP meetings where we are requesting them. Um, so they can be complicated, they can get difficult. But yeah, I mean that's definitely what we experience each time.
Yeah. And it's sad because I think it shouldn't be that experience, but it's tough. It's a tough dynamic and it's a tough thing to go through. One thing that I always tell my family is when we're going into an IEP meeting, and even when I'm working on treatment plans through insurance and whatnot, whenever you're highlighting your child's weaknesses, it never feels good, but really that's what you have to do in these meetings, and it
Hmm.
sucks. I mean, you want to talk about what your child does well, and you do have opportunities to do that. But that's not what's going to get your kid the services, right? We have to paint the picture of our child on their worst day so that they're safe, they're successful on their worst day, along with their best days. So I think that as well is just hard. The constant. I think there's constant little pokes of reminding you of the grief. My child's here. Didn't think we are going to be here. And I think that those IP meetings can often bring that.
Yeah, and if your child has like a reevaluation or has to have a new piece of an IEP, like Grayson, for example, just needed to have a reeval. You often get a lot of those results during the IEP meeting. And it's kind of like a constant reminder of the things that your kid can't do. And so
Hmm.
that also does bring that sadness into the meeting. And our most recent meeting, which just happened in March, we got we got that information, and luckily the rest of the meeting was okay. But it is sad. You're getting information about a lot of the things that your kid can't do, and then a tiny little bit about like maybe some of the progress that they've made, and it can be really discouraging. But those are the situations where you just have to be be loud and let them know what your kid needs, and don't be afraid to tell them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk a bit more about that and what it's like to advocate. I know sometimes people are nice and they feel like being nice can't really coexist with advocating, and it surely can. And we'll get into that in a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, what I do want to go over a bit, and we like to keep this podcast really lighthearted, but I think there's a aspect to IEPs that I would really love to educate our listeners if they don't already have this knowledge, um, just to help empower families to be able to advocate for their child. So there's a couple of laws that do apply to all of our public school systems in all of the states. Um, and there is one law, IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And that basically specifies that your school, your public school, must provide special support and services to your child. They can't just say, okay, good luck with this, hope your child succeeds with this, but they must provide solutions. So that gives your child a right to an individualized education plan, to any accommodations, behavior supports, and it also gives you the right as the caregiver to attend those meetings, to know what's going on, to see the records, to request for evals and to disagree. You're allowed to disagree. So um, you're protected under that for your child. Um, and then under IDEA is something called FAPE. FAPE stands for Free, Appropriate, and Public Education. So um, it is your right to it is your right that the public school should provide your child free education, and it must be appropriate for the child's needs. And what this really means is that the education that they're receiving should show and provide meaningful educational progress. It's not a matter of, okay, you're sending them to school, they have a free place to go, but they're just kind of sitting there and, doing nothing. They're not thriving, they're just there. And sadly, I've seen that far, far too much. So that is something that you are protected under. Um, there's something else called LRE, which stands for Least Restrictive Environment. And this is a law that is really about giving your children inclusive opportunities. So what it looks at is how is the child going to get the most amount of learning, the most amount of contact with their peers, most opportunities for communication and support. Sometimes um, people confuse that with let's give them the least amount of supports. Let's provide the least amount that they need, but that is not the case. It's a matter of what is the environment that's going to give them the most access to their neurotypical peers while also ensuring that they are getting the instruction that they need. Sometimes in settings that are quote unquote less restrictive, which you would look at like a mainstream setting, a general education class setting, you would think that's least restrictive. But for some children, that's absolutely not because in order for them to be restricted in the least amount, they need more supports. They need more help, more individualization with their education, that sort of thing. Um, and then there are other laws. There's the Section 504, which really goes into non-discrimination. If a child does need things to support them and to allow them to access the educational setting. Like for example, they need medication or preferential seating, or they may need some movement breaks. It's a law that prevents the schools, from discriminating against what your child needs. Um, and um, so when you hear 504, I know like Kate, I was curious. So your children, Grayson has an IEP.
Hmm.
And then Rosalind, does she have an IEP or does she have a 504?
She's a 504.
Okay. So that's a big thing that a lot of families do get confusion on. So there, and are you aware of like, did anyone ever explain to you like why one gets one or the other? And you probably know, but just curious.
No, actually, I don't.
Okay. Yeah, so that this is a big thing too. A lot of times you just get kind of thrown these things your way and you're like, I don't even know why we're doing this, but it sounds good,
Hmm.
right? So the IEP is more so focusing on how the child is going to receive the instruction, um, like how we're going to individualize their education so that it is accessible to them. Um, whereas the 504 isn't necessarily related to the instruction, but it's more so. Like, what kind of accommodations are we going to provide? How are they going, what kind of supports are they going to get to be successful in that setting? So, one is more so focuses on how a child is taught, whereas the other one is more so how they're accessing the environment. So, 504 would be more so just how to make the environment safe, they're healthy, they're happy, all of their needs are met, whether or not they're medical or what it may be. Um, so all of these laws are federal laws, but the thing that's the kicker is that each state does have a way to interpret these laws differently, which does make it a little bit trickier. So um, there are laws about timelines, about how um, you know the schools need to respond within a reasonable amount of time, or what allows a child to have autism as their classification on their IEP. Are they eligible for getting that extended school year, that schooling over the summer? And what are the rules state to state? So it does vary. It is up for interpretation. So that's one thing just to keep in mind, that each state's going to be a little bit different. But when we're looking at, school supports, so there are multiple reasons why kids might need support. So I'm assuming that Grayson has communication challenges. Does he have sensory challenges?
I don't think that any are listed in his IEP, but speech, yes, for sure.
So yes, speech, that would be an area that would be covered within the IEPs. Some children, with when it comes to communication, they might have a device. I know Grayson has a device. Not sure if you get that from school or is that through insurance?
It's through insurance, I believe.
Okay. Um, so yes, schools, you can get it covered through schools, but there's a lot of hoops you need to jump often there. Just like insurance, you have
Hmm.
similar-esque things with schools. So um, some children might use visuals for communication. So you might see those kind of things. Social interactions can often be a challenge and be something that would cause a child to need an IEP, or like specifically working on social skills and those interactions with their friends in the classroom, or providing them with opportunities for social engagement. Um, there's the behavioral aspect. So um, some children are more rigid, or they have difficulty with change. Is that one of Grayson's challenges by any chance, or is I think you were sharing he's pretty flexible, right?
Um, it depends on what the transition would be and what the activity he would be kind of having to be flexible with. Um, I would say it's a 50-50 shot.
Okay. Yeah, so, those are some examples. Some children do have a much harder time with that, with the transitions. 50-50 shot, I would say, is still pretty significant
Hmm.
of a challenge to overcome. So, I mean, the list it can go on and on, but these are just some kind of common areas in which a child might receive supports. Now, you were sharing too, which I think last week, about his nursing support in school, which kind of baffled me that he didn't actually get a nurse through the school. Um, and you had to go through insurance for that during the school day.
Yeah, I mean so the school has like a school nurse, but the classroom in particular has a a nurse devoted to just the classroom. But she sits up in the main nurse's office and she will tend to the kids in the school as a whole. But like if I guess she takes priority to his classroom if needed.
Hmm. And your nurse that you have that comes in, is this the nurse that you're speaking of, or you have someone that comes in with him?
No, this they're separate. They're two different nurses.
Okay, so you need to
Mhm.
have someone extra that really is there dedicated to Grayson.
Yeah, because of his seizure activity and the fact that he has it so often, by the time he would have a seizure, the school nurse wouldn't get down to his classroom in time.
Mm, okay. See, that to me is something that kind of is a red flag to me there, just because that's preventing him from accessing his environment safely, and getting, that's a support that he really needs to be in that school
Mhm.
setting. So, I mean, kudos to you for getting the the nursing through insurance, but that to me would really appear to fall on the school's responsibility. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's numerous things. I mean, you were sharing that Grayson's IEPs are probably like 70 pages long. The 504 plan for Roslyn, I'm guessing, is a lot more minimal. Um,
Yeah,
are
it's like
some of
3 pages.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's much easier to implement something of that sort.
Mhm.
Um, so are some of these examples like things that supports that your children receive, or are there some things that supports that your kids receive within the school setting, or special instruction that they receive that might be common of others listening? Like I'm assuming they
Mm,
probably receive like speech. Does Grayson receive speech therapy and occupational therapy?
yeah, he receives speech, OT, and PT. And then the speech and OT work together twice a month to come in and work on feeding with him, because he has that condition where the part of his brain in the back, it pushes down through um, his skull, and so it causes pressure in the back of his throat. So he has difficulty swallowing and stuff. So the speech pathologist comes in and she works on swallowing and feeding and things like that. Um, and so that is a new thing that they just started. We just added that to his IEP. But yeah, I mean, a lot of this information is things that it's stuff we find in his IEP. Um, but funny enough, we actually never sign his IEPs.
Mm.
We we do not sign that. We don't sign the NOREP. We do not nothing. We used to, and I felt like we were kind of just locked in place then for a while. But we stopped signing them about a year and a half, 2 years ago now. And that was advised to us by an advocate that we had brought in with us to an appointment or to one of the meetings.
Yeah. So do you guys have frequent IEP meetings? I'm assuming that's the case.
I would say, well, we were having them like monthly. Now we're having them every 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
So it's
Yeah.
gotten better. Yeah, it's gotten better. Last year, we had a lot, and a lot of problems. Um, so yeah, we had the assistant superintendent in our IEP meetings because I brought a lawyer, and yeah, things have gotten ugly during our meetings. So,
Yeah. And I mean, it's sometimes what you have to do. We'll kind of talk a little bit about like a good first approach, but sometimes it kind of gets that way and you have to bring that back up with you. And good for you for, knowing like, the advocate advising that you don't have to sign anything. If you don't agree with it, you don't have to sign it.
mhm,
And for parents to know that you can request an IEP meeting at any point that you wish. So if it means monthly, if it means every 3 to 4 months, which is, typically it's once a year. And I think a lot of parents think they're locked into that they can only have that conversation once a year. But that is part of that IDEA. We're able to advocate for, these children and ask questions and see the data, which sadly often isn't there. Which is why, as a behavior analyst, I really love being part of that IEP meeting, because I know data and I know how to collect it and how to look at it and break it down. And if it just doesn't exist, that's problem number one. But so preparing for the big meeting, you kind of touched on this a little bit.
mhm.
You were saying it brings a lot of emotions. What are some of the ways that you prepare for your IEP meeting? So you said you kind of look at the IEP through prior.
Yeah. So I look through the last IEP, and then I'll look at the draft for the new one that the teacher will send home. She usually sends it home a couple days before the IEP meeting. So I will highlight any changes that they're proposing, and then I will write notes, kind of giving like my opinion and things that I want changed or things like that. And then I will take the data that has been provided to me throughout the time frame since the last meeting, and I will go through my calendar, and I have like a planner that I take with me to the meetings, and I will mark down like how many behaviors they are seeing and like what their data is showing versus what our RBT has taken. And we discuss like the discrepancies between the two data entries. And then I often will address any concerns that I have as far as usually it's staffing issues, or them not following his IEP, or them just changing things in his IEP without, asking or addressing anything. And that is typically how I prepare. I go in and I make sure I have paper evidence that will back up anything that I need to either criticize them for, or if I need to ask for something to change.
Yeah, I think that it seems like you go in very prepared. I think that that is a great approach. And just so, our listeners are aware out there, you do have a right to access those documents before the IEP. There's so many times that I have spoken to families and they're like, well, I never received anything and I'm just getting it today. And that's not okay. You should have access to everything. So if your child had a evaluation done or an FBA done, which is a functional behavior assessment, or their IEP and their progress. You should really have all that in hand prior. And a great way is to take it, highlight it, write your notes, write your questions. I think also a really great approach is if you have someone like you were mentioning, your pediatrician's really amazing, or maybe you have your BCBA that works with your child in home, or a speech therapist, or whatever professional that you trust, have them look over it, give their thoughts, give their opinions, and you are able to invite anyone that you see fit to that meeting. So if you want your entire team, your entire private therapeutic team to be at that IP meeting, they're welcome to go. Um, there are people out there, like Kate was mentioning, that do IEP advocacy. You could bring someone with you in that regard. But I feel that just having someone there, the more knowledgeable they are, the better. But just having someone there as that emotional support person, I think, can really make a big difference for families in those high stress situations. Do you guys typically bring people with you to your IP meetings?
Oh yeah. Yeah, Derek and I always go together, and then we'll bring our school BCBA and our home BCBA. Typically the assistant, sometimes we'll bring the our ABA director or assistant director, whichever one's available. And then if it's a difficult topic that we are meeting to discuss, I'll bring a lawyer or an advocate.
Yeah. So I think that that's a really important thing to think about, is that you don't have to just go into this alone. Um, Now, you shared that you were having IEP meetings every single month, and now
Mhm.
you're at like 3 to 4 months. Um, what kind of led to that? Like, so IEP meetings are a big deal, right? You kind of bringing everyone to the table. It's a very formal meeting. Why was that the decision over just having like a parent teacher conference type situation?
We were running into a lot of issues with the school, and the issues were severe enough that, it was Grayson's safety and the safety of our staff. So like our nursing staff and our RBT. And it things needed to be addressed and needed to be addressed in a way where things would be documented effectively and needed to be done in front of the educational staff, the special ed team, because they really needed to know what was going on. So yeah, there were a few meetings, and like I said, they had brought in the assistant superintendent at one point because I think they were trying to scare us a little bit. But joke's on them because it didn't work. And the one meeting he actually attended, in particular, he actually agreed with us and not them. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I go in with so much proof that the teacher literally shakes. And she usually cries after each meeting that we have. And it's not because I'm mean, it's because I go in and I can point out literally every single thing and every single lie that she or any of the staff, are trying to tell to cover their tracks. And, Derek and I are not afraid to call her out or call the staff out in the middle of the meeting. And I've done it several times. It took me 3 years to kind of grow the courage to start calling people out in the middle of the meetings. But now that I do, I actually love it because I know that I have the information and the evidence to back me up, and they can't really lie about it if it's in black and white right there in front of them. So it really makes every time there's an IEP meeting, you can definitely tell when it's our meeting because everybody gets very nervous and anxious. But I think this year we've actually been doing quite well. We've only had 2 meetings so far, and I mean, they've gone pretty well. I mean, the meetings used to last like 2 to 3 hours, and now they're only like an hour and a half. So that's
Oh, that's
progress.
impressive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you feel
Yeah.
like your team now is more cohesive? Do you feel like your team that's working for Grayson is more on the same page or closer to?
Um, hmm. I think that the teacher, this is her 3rd year teaching at the school. I think she's gotten more used to the routine and used to being a teacher, and she's just she's kind of got her crap together now. She didn't have it together the first 2 years, and some of the administration has changed, and she now has a little bit more freedom to do what she wants to do as a teacher,
Mm.
and she doesn't have to follow their very strict guidelines. And honestly, the turning point was last year, at the end of last year. She and I met for a parent-teacher conference after our last IEP meeting of the year last year. And basically, I sat down with her and I told her very bluntly, like, look, this is nothing against you. This is me needing to do what's best for my kid. And I know that you want what's best for him because you wouldn't be in this field if you didn't want what's best for your students. And she's about 6 or 7 years younger than me. And she just broke down and was like, I am trying my best, but my hands are tied with this current, administration. And, I think I finally understood that she was having such a difficult time. And, I said to her, if you are honest with me, I'll be honest with you, just cut the crap and tell me what's going on. And
Yeah.
basically, that meeting that we had, that was the last time that she basically was like non-communicative. She now is like, wonderful. If there's anything that happens, I get a phone call and a message, and a note home. Like she's very like on top of her game. And it's like a totally different teacher came to school this year. And so like she's been doing great, and they are so understaffed, it's not even funny. And I don't know how she's doing it, to be honest with you, because she has three staff, including herself,
Mm.
and she has eight kids in the class. Um, and two of the eight are very aggressive kids. So I really don't know. I don't know how she does it every day. And um, yeah, just having those honest conversations. I wish I would have had it earlier with her because
Yeah.
I think it would have changed a lot of things. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think just not being afraid to have those conversations and not being afraid to hold your ground. That's like a really big, I mean, that's probably the biggest bit of advice I can give.
And so it seems like, I think on both ends, both of you had to come to more of an understanding of one another and your barriers and your, what you can, what you can't do, what's preventing you from doing what you know you need to do. And it is a very real concern that I think most teachers are great teachers and they want to do well and they're trying their absolute best and putting their blood, sweat, and tears into it. I taught for a bit at a non-public placement, and I know when you're done working, you're not done working. The work
Mhm.
never stops. So I know how much work it is, but some of these teachers and possibly all, are really dealing with lack of resources and pressures from the administration above. And that is something that I think is good for parents to have an understanding of, because what I tell a lot of families is that sometimes it's not the teacher, it's the system. But it
Mhm.
doesn't mean you can't still fight against the system, because you can. And when you pull, that's why it's very important and to talk about those more boring topics of IDEA and least restrictive environment and so forth, because if you have an understanding of that, you those are the tools that you have to advocate for fighting against the broken system. But I think that's great that you were able to kind of break that barrier a bit with the teacher, um, because really that's what it's all about. These IEP meetings are really designed for us to work together as a cohesive team, and the sad truth of it is often it feels like you against me, which is not the way that it should
Mhm.
be. Um,
Yeah.
which, I think a really healthy approach for starting off um, with your first IEP meeting, or maybe it's your first IEP meeting with your new school placement, or, your first of some sort, whether it's a new team, new placement, or just new in general. Um, I think starting it off with having that we're a team mindset is probably going to be the most effective.
Mhm.
I think to come in on day one with the fighter mentality, I know that that's kind of where you are now, Kate. And I think that I'm imagining, did you feel that way on day one, or did it just the continuous problems kind of get you to that point?
Oh no, I came in initially totally fine. I was very anxious and uh I guess optimistic about working together.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean it I only had to turn into the way that I am now because of not getting anywhere with them
Right.
and like not having any sort of communication whatsoever with anybody. And it was yeah, it was just not working for me. So
Yeah, and I think that I would advise the same approach. To try to go into it positively and assuming positive intent on everyone's behalf, until you have to turn on that mama bear. And just you just made me think of something like you're saying that there's literally no communication. I mean, literally, you can advocate for having anything that you need to make your child safe and give them appropriate education in the IEP meeting. Maybe it's literally that you just have a communication method stated within your IEP. Um, there, if you don't know, just ask. There is a place to put literally everything within that document. Um, so I think in general, you might go into a meeting and you might be in fighter mode because you've had to do this for years and years prior. Um, an approach that I like to suggest to my families is to kind of go into it with asking a lot of questions. So maybe you have concerns about the child, self-injuring, your child self-injuring at school. Maybe they're unsafe, or maybe um, you notice that they're not doing something that you're doing at home that's really effective with the, ABA team at home. Some of those ways that you can kind of start to learn more is by starting off with a question. What seems to be the most challenging part of the day for them? When are you seeing this self-injury? Or how do you suggest we work together on this? What has helped you? What are you seeing? So you can get more and more granular in your questions. But I think starting off any concern with a question um, is a really good approach because it models to the team that you're trying to learn more, to hear them, and that you're trying to take that team approach. Do you find that that's something that you do in your meetings with your teams?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, definitely. And especially now that things have gotten a little bit less heated, it's easier to do that too.
Yeah. And I think also, like, as you get to know your teams better, and some of these students and some of our children do have the same teachers or the same therapist year after year. So sometimes you have the luxury of getting to know your teams very well. Sometimes it changes every year and then it's a whole another story. I mean, I've had families tell me, well, this year is great because my teacher's great, but then last year was awful. And
Hmm.
that's sad to me because it shows me that we're capable of giving that child what they need. Um, and it's so circumstantial on that teacher, which a teacher can make or break, but
Yep.
also the system can do the same. um, so having an understanding of like where the breakdown is and where the problems are, it can really fall in many different buckets
Yeah.
of where the problem really lies. So you were kind of talking about this, of how you aren't afraid to go into your meetings anymore and kind of call people out or speak up or not just stay silent. Um, and I think that parents need to know that it's not their job. You're not there just to receive their opinion, their plan. It's not their plan. This plan is as much their plan as it is your plan.
Hmm.
So I think that's really important to, it's okay if you're speaking up and you're saying things that are less than favorable. Um, you know, it gets you, it can get you what your child needs. And I think that you're an example of that, of, having that courage to speak up against what is not right. Um, and this is actually something that you brought up as well too, that you're not signing the IEP as of recent. So,
Hmm.
um, it's okay to do that. You can say, you get to the end of this long IEP meeting, you're in there for, it can be 4 hours. It can really be till whenever. I've had to shut down IEP meetings and say, okay, well, can we finish this on this date? Because they can go that long.
Hmm.
Um, you don't have to sign that meeting before you leave that room. Um, you can say, I need time to review this. You can ask further questions. You can ask for further clarification. Um, and that's something I think that we should normalize. To not sign a document that you don't agree with, I think is a really wise move. Um, and then also asking your educators, can you explain this to me as a non-educator? I think is a really important thing. That in itself is a skill I think that a lot of professionals struggle with. When you're in your field and you're speaking that jargon all day long, to then have to present it to someone that is not an expert in your field, I think is a skill in itself. So um, don't be afraid to ask, please explain that to me. I don't understand what that means. What is that word? And I think that in itself is going to be very empowering for families.
I guess the key takeaways would be that you do not need to be one of the educators. That's why they are there. You just need to be a parent. You don't need to have the terminology down. You don't need to know every law by heart. And you don't even need to really sound like a professional educator. Go in and talk about what you know. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's your child. You know your kid the best, and you need to see from the school staff consistency from them, accurate documentation, and evidence that they are actually providing the services and the education that is appropriate for your kid.
Absolutely. And I think you're a testament to that with your children, Grayson and Rosalind. You know, your child is more than their scores, their behavior charts, their meeting notes, all of the narratives that your educators provide. Um, Really, we're just here to help you advocate for improving the quality of your child's life and their ability to build friendships and have relationships and be confident. That's really what it all boils down to, and that's the heart of it. Um, so we thank you so much for coming today, and we hope that you will share a little bit about one of your IEP experiences. Maybe you have a first experience or a great experience. Please share. We would love to hear.
So follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. We're found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and Amazon. Feel free to write in and share tips and any upcoming topics that you would like us to touch base on.
Next week, we're very excited to bring back our very own Roz Martin onto the show, who will discuss more about her sibling bond with Grayson. We'll talk about the good, the bad, and the uglies of living life with a brother on the spectrum. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Sip and stim. Sip and stim.